I went up to the attic looking for old photographs. I didn't expect my neighbor's grown son to find me there, standing in the dust and quiet, his voice trembling as he spoke my name. What happened next changed the way I understood myself, and the way two lonely people can truly see each other. Before we begin, tell me something in the comments. From which city are you watching us today? I love knowing where these stories travel. And if this kind of quiet, human storytelling speaks to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. It truly helps more than you know. Now, let me tell you what happened. I hadn't been in the attic for years. Not since my husband passed, and the house became quieter than I ever imagined it could. That morning, sunlight leaned gently through the hallway window, and I felt an urge to find something familiar, something that proved I had lived a full life before silence moved in. The attic ladder creaked under my weight, each step releasing the scent of old wood and forgotten summers. Dust floated in the light like tiny memories refusing to settle. I was halfway through a box of photo albums when I heard it. Footsteps below. Then my name spoken carefully, as if the house itself might overhear. It was Daniel, my neighbor's son. I'd known him since he was a boy riding a bicycle too big for him. Now he was grown, visiting his mother next door after a long absence. I hadn't expected him to stop by, let alone find me up there. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said. His voice shook just enough for me to notice. "Your front door was open, and I thought something might be wrong." I laughed softly, more to calm myself than him. "Nothing wrong," I told him. "Just chasing old memories." He stayed at the bottom of the ladder for a moment, then asked if I needed help. When he climbed up, the space felt smaller, warmer somehow. Not uncomfortable, just different. We stood there surrounded by boxes labeled in my handwriting, the proof of decades carefully tucked away. We talked about ordinary things at first. His job, his mother's garden, the weather. But beneath it all was something unspoken, a shared awareness of time passing. He picked up a photograph and handed it to me, asking about the woman smiling back from another life. I told him that was me before I knew how quickly years could move. His voice trembled again when he said, "You seem strong, even now." No one had said that to me in a long time. In that dusty attic, with afternoon light fading, I felt seen. Not admired, not rescued, just understood. And as we sat down on old crates, talking more honestly than I had with anyone in years, I realized this moment wasn't about surprise at all. It was about connection and the quiet courage it takes to open a door you thought was closed forever. We stayed there longer than I expected, talking while the attic slowly cooled as the sun shifted. Daniel listened in a way that surprised me. Not polite listening, not the kind people do while waiting for their turn to speak. He really listened. When I paused, he didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it breathe. At some point, my knees reminded me of my age, and I laughed again, shaking my head. "I should come down before I get stuck up here and become part of the storage," I said. He smiled, quick and almost shy, and offered his hand as I climbed down. I hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was steady, careful. When my feet touched the floor, neither of us pulled away right away. There was nothing improper about it, just a shared awareness that this small contact mattered more than it should have. I invited him into the kitchen for coffee. It felt natural, like something that had been decided long before either of us spoke. The kitchen smelled of old books and fresh grounds, a mix of past and present that fit my mood perfectly. We sat across from each other at the small table by the window. Outside, leaves stirred in the breeze, and a bird landed on the fence, watching us as if curious. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into it before finally looking up at me. "I didn't expect today to feel like this," he said quietly. "Like what?" I asked, though I already knew. Like I walked into a conversation I didn't know I needed. That honesty stayed with me. I told him about the evenings that felt longer than they should, about learning how to be alone without becoming lonely, and how those were two very different lessons. He shared how coming back to his childhood street made him feel both grown and small at the same time. There was a gentle tension between us, not uncomfortable, just alive. We were careful with our words, respectful of boundaries, but we didn't pretend the moment was meaningless either. When he finally stood to leave, he paused near the door. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me with your stories." After he left, the house felt different. Still quiet, but no longer empty. I realized that something had shifted inside me, not because of him alone, but because I had allowed myself to be present again. And that, I knew, was only the beginning. The next few days carried a different rhythm. I noticed it in the way I moved through the house, how I lingered at the windows a little longer, how the silence no longer pressed against my chest but rested there gently. I told myself it was nothing, just the after effect of good conversation. Still, when I heard a car door close next door, my heart paid attention before my mind did. It was 3 days later when Daniel knocked again. This time I was ready, though I hadn't planned to be. I opened the door to find him holding a small cardboard box. "My mother found these while cleaning," he said. "They're yours. Old letters. She thought you might want them." I recognized my handwriting immediately. Letters I had written and forgotten, tied with a faded ribbon. I invited him in, and we sat in the living room, the afternoon light stretching across the floor between us. As I opened the box, memories surfaced, not sharply, but like waves rolling in slow and steady. Daniel watched me, not intrusively, just present. When I looked up, I realized he wasn't studying the letters at all. He was watching my face, the way emotion moved across it. "You don't have to open them now," he said softly. "I want to," I replied, and I did. I read one aloud, my voice steady but warm. It was about hope, about believing life would keep offering new chapters even when one closed. When I finished, the room felt full, as if the words had stayed with us. Daniel spoke then, his voice lower than before. "It's strange," he said. "I grew up thinking adulthood meant everything was settled. But listening to you, I realize it's more like learning how to keep choosing." That thought stayed with me. Choosing. To speak, to listen, to show up. We talked until evening crept in, until the sky softened into blues and grays. There was no rush, no expectations, just two people allowing honesty to take the lead. When he stood to leave, he didn't reach for the door right away. He looked at me with something like gratitude mixed with respect. "I'm glad you were in the attic that day," he said. So was I, because somewhere between old letters and quiet conversations, I had discovered something important. I wasn't revisiting the past. I was standing firmly in the present, and it felt solid beneath my feet. Time has a way of settling things when you let it. After that afternoon with the letters, Daniel and I didn't suddenly change our lives or make grand declarations. Instead, something quieter happened. We became part of each other's weeks in small, meaningful ways. Sometimes it was a short conversation by the fence in the early evening. Other times, coffee on my porch while the sun dipped low and the street grew calm. We spoke about work, about aging parents, about the strange feeling of realizing you're not who you were at 30, and not yet who you'll be at 70. There was comfort in those talks, the kind that doesn't demand anything but honesty. One evening, as autumn settled in, I invited him up to the attic again. Not to search for anything in particular, just to sit where it had all begun. We brought folding chairs this time. The space no longer felt dusty or forgotten. It felt lived in. "I used to think moments like this were accidents," he said, looking around. "Now I think they're invitations." I smiled at that. Invitations we decide whether to accept. We sat quietly for a while. No awkwardness. Just the sound of the house and the understanding that whatever this connection was, it was built on care and respect. I felt older, yes, but also clearer. more myself than I had been in years. When we finally came down, he paused at the bottom of the ladder, looking up at me. "You helped me see things differently," he said. I shook my head gently. We helped each other. After he left that night, I stood alone in the hallway, listening to the familiar sounds of my home. The quiet was back, but it no longer felt empty. It felt earned, full of meaning. I learned something important through all of this. Discovery doesn't belong to the young. Connection doesn't follow a schedule. And growth doesn't ask permission from age. Sometimes it begins in an attic with a trembling voice and the courage to listen.